I never expected to see her again like this. Not after all those years of carefully dodging every family gathering, every holiday dinner, every casual weekend visit that might put me in the same room as her. I told myself it was just growing up, moving away for college, building a life far enough that I didn't have to feel that strange, twisting pull in my chest whenever Sarah walked into a space. But Mom's surgery changed everything in an instant. The call came late one night, her voice weak and trembling on the line, and suddenly I was booking a flight back home with a suitcase that felt heavier than it should, my heart already uneasy long before the plane even touched down. The house smelled the same, that faint mix of lemon cleaner and old wood, the kind of scent that wraps around your memories and won't let go. I stepped through the front door, the wheels of my suitcase whispering against the tile, and there she was. My mom's best friend since before I could remember, standing in our familiar kitchen, like she belonged there more than I did now. 47, divorced for a couple of years now, still carrying that same quiet confidence that used to make the air feel thicker, warmer, harder to breathe whenever she was near. She was reaching up for a glass on the high shelf, her blouse riding up just enough to reveal the soft curve of her waist, that gentle dip where her hip began, skin pale and real under the warm kitchen light. I froze right there in the doorway, suitcase still gripped tight in my hand. The wheels barely settled on the tile. Our eyes met across the space, and in that single awkward second, everything I thought I'd buried came flooding back stronger than ever. My heart slammed against my ribs like it wanted out. She smiled, small and warm, the kind of smile that felt like it had always been meant just for me, and the old forbidden pull hit me all over again. Like gravity I couldn't fight, like a storm I knew was coming but still stepped into anyway. I managed some lame greeting, my voice cracking just a little at the edges, and she laughed softly. That low, familiar sound wrapping around me like an old blanket that suddenly felt far too warm against my skin. She stepped down from her toes, glass in hand, and brushed past me to set it on the counter. That's when her scent hit me. Warm vanilla layered with something deeper, like aged sandalwood that clung to her skin after all these years, intimate and grounding in a way that made my chest tighten. It wasn't just perfume, it was her, the way she had always smelled when she leaned in to check my homework or ruffle my hair, but now it wrapped around me like a secret I wasn't supposed to know, making my pulse stutter in ways I couldn't explain even to myself. I stood there, breath caught somewhere between my throat and my lungs, wondering why one brush of air from her body couldn't do years of distance so completely. That night I lay in my childhood bed, the same creaky one from high school with its faded blue sheets, staring up at the glowing tech stars, still stuck to the ceiling like forgotten promises from a boy who didn't understand what wanting really meant. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the fridge downstairs and the occasional creak of floorboards as Mom shifted restlessly in her room upstairs. Still recovering from the surgery, I kept replaying that moment in the kitchen over and over. The way her body had moved so naturally when she reached, the soft sound of her breath catching just a little, how her scent had lingered in the air long after she moved away. I told myself it was nothing. Just old memories playing tricks on a tired, jet-lagged mind. She had practically helped raise me in some ways. Always there when Mom pulled late shifts at the hospital, not like the other adults who saw just a kid, but like she saw the man I was slowly becoming underneath all the awkwardness and uncertainty. The way her eyes would soften for a breath or two before she looked away, as if catching herself on the edge of something she shouldn't feel. She's twice my age, I thought, fists clenched tight under the thin sheets, nails digging into my palms until it almost hurt. She's practically family, Mom's best friend, the one who was there for every scraped knee and awkward school play. Why the hell am I already aching just thinking about the low sound of her voice saying my name like that? Why does the memory of her hand steadying my shoulder years ago, when I was scared about some stupid test, make my skin burn now like it never did back then? I turned over restlessly, face pressed into the pillow that still smelled faintly of the same laundry detergent from my teen years, and tried to shove it all down deep where it belonged. This was wrong on every level. Mom was recovering just upstairs at hers, weak and trusting, counting on us both. Sarah was here to help, to be the steady friend she'd always been. Not whatever this pull was dragging me toward like an invisible current I couldn't fight. I squeezed my eyes shut, but her face kept floating behind my lids. That small smile, the soft curve of her waist under the blouse, the way the light had caught on her skin. Sleep didn't come easy that night. It felt like the room itself was holding its breath with me, the darkness thick with the weight of what I couldn't admit, even in whispers to myself. Filling the space with a warmth that felt too intimate for morning light. She was there again, wearing an old t-shirt that had seen better days, the soft fabric clinging in a way that made it impossible not to notice the full curve of her breasts, the way it draped over her body like it knew every secret she carried from years of real living. I stood there longer than I should have in the doorway, pretending to check my phone, but really just watching her move around the space like she owned the quiet rhythm of it all. The faint lines at the corners of her eyes when she smiled at something on her phone screen. Those little creases that spoke of laughter and worry and time well spent. The natural sway of her hips as she reached for the creamer in the fridge, unsclifient and graceful in a way girls my age never quite managed. Real life had left its gentle marks on her, the kind that came from years of gardening in the sun, working late, loving hard, healing quietly. And somehow that only made the heat building low in my chest worse, more insistent, like a slow burn I couldn't put out. I offered to help with breakfast, my voice coming out rougher than I meant, almost hoarse from the sleepless night. "Need a hand with that?" She turned toward me, and our hands touched over the coffee mug, mine closing around it just as hers did, fingers brushing in that accidental way that sent a spark shooting straight up my arm and down my spine. Electric and quiet all at once. Her skin was warm, slightly rough from years of gardening and real work, not the smooth and touched feel of the girls my age who still felt like they were pretending at life. A spark that made my breath hitch for half a second. I didn't pull away right away, neither did she. For that suspended moment our fingers stayed there, the mug warm between us like a fragile bridge holding back a flood I could already feel rising. The heat of her skin lingered even after we let go, a ghost of contact that made my pulse thrum louder than the coffee maker. I caught myself staring again at those faint lines around her eyes, at the way her hair fell loose around her face in the soft morning light filtering through the window. The word landed low in my gut, heavy and warm, twisting something inside me that I had no business feeling. She used to call me that when I was little, innocent and easy, but now it felt different. Weighted, intimate, like a secret slipping out by accident between two people who shouldn't be sharing secrets at all. "This is wrong," the voice in my head whispered sharply even as my pulse hammered louder in my ears. "She changed my diapers once. For God's sake," back when I was too small to remember anything but her voice soothing me. She was there the night I broke my arm in Little League, holding my other hand tight while Mom drove like a madwoman to the hospital. But the way she says my name now. It's like she's tasting it on her tongue, like she's noticing way I'm noticing her, seeing past the boy to whatever I am now. I swallowed hard, stepping back to grab the plates from the cabinet, but the air between us stayed charged, thick with everything we weren't saying, everything I was too ashamed to admit even to myself. My hands trembled just a little as I set the table, the clink of ceramic too loud in the quiet. I kept finding excuses to stay close after that. Pouring juice with careful slowness, setting the plates just so. Every small movement she made pulled at me like an invisible thread. The tilt of her head when she laughed softly at some dumb joke I made to fill the silence, the way her fingers brushed a strand hair behind her ear with unconscious grace. I told myself I was just being helpful, that this was normal family support while Mom rested upstairs and needed us both to keep things running, but deep down I knew the truth sinking in like slow poison, sweet and dangerous. Quiet and insistent like a tide I couldn't hold back no matter how hard I tried to reason with it. Every breath she took near me felt like it was pulling me under a little more, the vanilla and sandalwood wrapping around my thoughts until I could barely think straight. And then, as I handed her the last plate, our eyes met again across the narrow counter. She held my gaze a beat too long, something flickering there in the depths. Recognition, maybe hesitation, maybe the same quiet hunger I was fighting so desperately to ignore. High breath caught sharply in my throat. The room felt smaller suddenly, the distance between us electric and humming with unspoken words that pressed against my skin like a promise I wasn't ready for. I wanted to say something, anything to break the moment or lean into it, but the words stuck thick in my mouth. Instead, I just stood there, heart slamming against my ribs, wondering how long I could pretend this was still innocent. Before it wasn't. before the pull became something I couldn't walk away from, no matter how much I knew I should. The silence stretched between us, heavy and alive, until she finally looked away first, her cheeks carrying the faintest flush that could have been from the steam or from something else entirely. I turned to the sink, rinsing a knife that didn't need rinsing, just to have something to do with my hands that were suddenly too aware of their own emptiness. But even with my back to her, I could feel her presence. The soft rustle of her t-shirt as she moved, the way her breathing seemed to match the uneven rhythm of mine. This shouldn't be happening. Not here, not now, not with her. Yet every second I spent fighting it only made the craving louder, deeper, like a hunger I'd carried without knowing its name until the moment our eyes locked again in that kitchen doorway. By day 3, the house had settled into this fragile rhythm that felt too easy, too dangerous. Mom was still resting upstairs, her door closed most of the time, leaving the downstairs to us like some unspoken agreement that we would simply keep things running. Sarah asked me to help with the laundry in the living room because the dryer had finished and the basket was overflowing with warm clothes that already carried traces of her. I said yes too quickly, my voice catching like I was volunteering for something far more intimate than folding towels. We sat on opposite sides of the couch at first, the afternoon light slanting through the blinds and catching dust motes in the air between us, turning everything golden and hazy like a dream I was afraid to wake from. Her hands moved with that quiet efficiency, smoothing shirts, pairing socks with careful precision that made my chest tighten in ways I couldn't explain. Then a pair of black lace panties slipped from the pile and landed softly on my knee. The fabric was impossibly delicate, like something meant to be hidden, whispered about but never held. I reached for it without thinking, and our fingers brushed when she reached at the same moment. Time stretched, slow and merciless, the seconds thickening around us. The lace stayed between us for one heartbeat too, the warmth of her skin bleeding through the thin material into mine, sending a current straight up my arm that settled low and heavy in my stomach. I should have dropped it immediately. I should have looked away, muttered some excuse, left the room before the ache could root itself deeper. Instead, my eyes lifted to hers and held, searching for any sign that she felt the same spark jumping between us, the same forbidden pull that made my pulse thunder in my ears. Her breath hitched, just barely, a small sound that sent heat rushing under my collar and made everything inside me tighten. I could feel the pulse in my wrist where we touched, matching the growing hunger that had been building since the kitchen doorway, growing heavier with every shared silence. She didn't pull back right away. Her gaze dropped to her hands, then back up, something flickering there like she was weighing every year between us, every memory that should have kept this impossible. I imagined the lace against her later, the way it would rest where my fingers had almost been, and the thought made my throat tighten with shame and want all tangled together until I couldn't tell them apart. This is wrong, I kept repeating inside my head. A desperate loop that only made the craving louder. She's been part of my life longer than I can remember, closer than family in ways that make this feel like the deepest kind of betrayal. But my fingers stayed, trembling just enough that she must have noticed, the delicate fabric now warm from both of us, holding secrets neither of us dared name. We finished the basket in silence after that, but the air stayed thick, every fold of fabric feeling like another layer of restraint peeling away slowly, teasingly. I kept stealing glances at the curve of her shoulder under her thin sweater, the way her hair fell forward when she leaned down, brushing her cheek with unconscious softness. Every small domestic motion pulled me deeper, like gravity shifting beneath my feet without warning. The scent of clean cotton mixed with that faint vanilla and sandalwood that always clung to her, wrapping around me until my thoughts grew hazy and slow, like I was drowning in something sweet and inevitable. Aware of how close our knees were on the couch, inches apart, the heat from her leg radiating across the narrow space like an invitation I wasn't supposed to hear. One accidental brush, and everything might crack open right there in the quiet living room. I wondered if she could hear my heart, loud as it was to me, pounding out questions I had no right to ask. The afternoon bled into evening without mercy, and the tension didn't tease. It only changed shape, settling into something quieter but no less dangerous, like a storm gathering just beyond the windows. Later in the kitchen, the radio on her phone switched to an old song, that slow, aching Chris's off track about a wicked game, the notes drifting out soft and low while we chopped vegetables side by side at the counter, creating this intimate little world that felt stolen from time itself. the slow sway of her hips under the dim light, a half-smile that vanished when she realized I was there. I had told myself it was nothing, just Sarah being kind, lost in the music, offering a moment of warmth to a boy who needed it more than he understood. Now, with the same song curling around us years later, the memory sharpened into something I couldn't look away from, cutting deeper with every note. That look hadn't been kindness. It had been restraint. The same kind I saw lightening her jaw now as she stirred the pan, her shoulders rising and falling with breaths that seemed to measured to controlled. She had been holding back even then, fighting whatever this was while I remained oblivious, chasing after girls my own age who never quite reached me the way she did without even trying. The knife in my hand stilled completely, my chest felt too full, like I might drown in the realization that washed over me in slow, relentless waves. All those summers she had driven me places, laughed at my dumb jokes, stayed late helping with homework when Mom worked late. She had felt it too, buried it under smiles and gentle distance that now looked like survival. The knowledge settled low and heavy, making the space between our elbows on the counter feel like a live wire humming with current I could almost taste. I wanted to ask her if she remembered that night, if the song brought it back for her the same way it was tearing me open now. Until I could feel the warmth of her through our clothes and know I wasn't alone in this storm that had been building for years. Instead I kept chopping, breath shallow and uneven, fighting the pull that said this rhythm had fallen into wasn't just helpful anymore. It was intimate in ways that scared me, ways that made the house feel smaller, the walls closer, every shared glance heavier with what we weren't saying. The song played on, filling the gaps between our movements, and I caught her humming along under her breath, soft and almost reluctant, like she was trying not to let the melody pull her under too. That sounded something to me, unraveling threads I thought were secure, making my hands unsteady on the knife. How long had she carried this too? The question burned in my throat, but I swallowed it down, focusing on the rhythm of the blade instead of the ache spreading through my veins like slow fire. That evening the tension crested when I came downstairs for water and found her bending to pick up a dropped towel near the hallway, the soft lamp light outlining her form with gentle shadows that made my mouth go dry and my thoughts scatter. The sight stopped me cold in the doorway, my hand still on the railing as if I needed something solid to hold on to before I did something reckless. She moved with unconscious grace even in that simple motion, and I stared too long, lost in the curve of her back, the way her hair slipped over one shoulder like an invitation I had no business noticing. She straightened slowly, towel in hand, and caught me watching. Her eyes softened with something like sadness mixed with recognition. But her voice came out gentle, almost tender, wrapping around the words like they cost her everything to say. She said, the words landing soft yet cutting deep, silk and ice at once, "But this can't happen." The sting landed somewhere in my ribs, spreading outward like cold water over fevered skin. Boy, the word should have killed everything blooming inside me, should have reminded me of every boundary I was crossing in my mind with every stolen glance. Instead, it only sharpened the hunger, made me want to close the distance right there and prove how far from a boy I felt standing there with my heart hammering against my ribs, every inch of me aware of her in ways that felt ancient and new and terrifying all at once. Her voice had trembled on the last part, just enough to betray her, a tiny fracture in the calm she was trying so hard to hold. I saw the way her fingers tightened on the towel until her knuckles paled, the faint rise and fall of her breath that matched mine perfectly, like our bodies were already speaking the language our mouths refused to admit. She turned toward the stairs before I could find any words that wouldn't shatter the moment completely, leaving me rooted in place. The ache spreading until it felt like gravity itself was tilting me after her, pulling me forward even as my mind screamed to stay back, to remember who we were. A clean line drawn in the quiet house while Mom slept upstairs unaware. But the way she hadn't quite met my eyes at the finish, the way her steps hesitated for half a second on the first stair, told me it was only the beginning of something neither of us could walk away from cleanly. The air still carried her warmth when she was gone, and I stood there breathing it in, wondering how much longer I could pretend my hands didn't remember the brush of lace, my ears the tremble in her voice, my whole body the pull that grew stronger with every almost moment we shared. The night settled heavy after that, but sleep stayed far away, leaving me turning the day over and over in the dark of my room. Every small touch replayed behind my eyes, magnified by the quiet until I could almost feel her fingers against mine again, the delicate fabric between us like a promise we both knew we shouldn't keep but cowldn't quite release. The woman who had been steady through so many of my growing pains, now suddenly the center of a storm I didn't know how to navigate without losing myself completely. And yet the shame only fed the fire, twisting it into something deeper, something I cowldn't name but cowldn't release either. I lay there listening to the house breathe around me, the occasional creak of floorboards upstairs making my heart jump, waiting for morning, knowing the rhythm would pull us close again whether we wanted it or not, whether we fought it or let it carry us under. Even the next morning the pull hadn't loosened. We moved around each other in the kitchen again, fixing breakfast while Mom took her medication upstairs, and every time our paths crossed the space felt smaller, the silence louder. I handed her the coffee mug and our fingertips met once more, lingering a fraction longer than necessary, enough for me to feel the faint tremor in her hand that mirrored my own. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes fully, and I wondered if she was replaying the laundry moment too, the lace, the heat, the way neither of us had wanted to let go. My mind kept drifting back to that old song, to the memory of her dancing, and now I saw it differently. Not as a random kindness, but as a crack in the armor she wore around me, a glimpse of the woman who had been fighting the same current for longer than I knew. It made the domestic tasks feel charged, every shared chore another thread weaving us tighter together in this house that suddenly felt too full of possibility and regret. I kept telling myself to pull back, to remember the years she had spent being the steady one, the safe one, but the truth was sinking in deeper with every hour. There had always been layers I was too young to see, glances I had dismissed, distances I had mistaken for disinterest when they were actually protection. Now those protections were fraying, thread by thread, and I was the one holding the loose end, unsure whether to tie it off or pull harder. The hunger wasn't simple anymore. It was laced with guilt, with the ache of knowing how wrong this could go, yet that only made it sharper, more alive. When she brushed past me to reach the spices, her arm grazing mine, I forgot how to breathe for a second, the vanilla scent flooding my senses until the room tilted slightly. She paused too, just long enough for our eyes to meet, and in that pause I saw the same war playing out behind her gaze. The need to stop, the inability to. By the time evening came again, the house felt like it was holding its breath with us. The rejection from the night before hung between us, softening the edges but not erasing the heat. I found excuses to stay near, helping clear the table after dinner, our movements synchronized in that quiet way that felt too natural, to write for something so forbidden. And when she finally said goodnight, her voice soft and carrying that same tremble, I knew the rhythm wasn't breaking, pulling me further under with every shared glance, every accidental touch that wasn't quite accidental anymore. And it was her. The next morning the air hung heavy with dew and unspoken things, pulling me outside before the house fully woke. She was already there in the garden, kneeling among the rows of tomatoes and herbs, her gloves caked with dark soil, a few loose strands of hair escaping their tie to brush the nape of her neck every time she reached forward. Sunlight caught her like it had been waiting for her specifically, making her skin glow with a warmth no filtered selfie or campus party could ever match. She looked rooted, alive in a way that made my chest tighten, more present than any girl my age who drifted through days chasing validation in likes and late-night texts. I filled a glass with cold water from the tap, the condensation already beating on the sides like tiny confessions, and carried it out to her across the damp grass. My steps felt too loud. "I'm sorry about last night," I said, offering the glass. "I didn't mean to make things awkward between us." The words came out quieter than I intended, almost swallowed by the morning bird song. She took it, and our fingers overlapped on the slick surface for a heartbeat longer than necessary. Not pulling away. Not immediately. The warmth of her skin seeped through the chill of the glass, lingering even after she accepted it fully. I watched a single drop of sweat trace slowly down toward her collarbone where the sun caught it, turning it into something impossible to ignore. She drank slowly, eyes half closed in the heat, throat moving with each swallow, and I forgot how to breathe again, the garden tilting just slightly around us. I know I should stop this. The thought looped in my head like a warning I cowldn't heed. Walk away now, pretend the pull is just leftover gratitude or the loneliness of these quiet days or anything except what it really was. But every time she breathed near me, the craving got louder, like thunder rumbling just beyond the hills, promising rain that would wash away every safe boundary it ever drawn. She smiled then, soft and a little tired around the edges, and handed the empty glass back. "No awkwardness," she murmured, her voice carrying that low warmth that settled deep under my ribs and refused to leave. "We're just figuring out the days as they come." I lingered there a moment longer than I should have, watching her return to the soil, her hands moving with practiced care through the earth. The way her shoulders shifted under her thin shirt, the faint sheen of effort on her arms, it all spoke of someone who had carried real weight, who knew how mornings like this could ground you when everything else felt like it was slipping. My own hands felt useless at my sides, young and untested compared to hers. I wanted to say more, to bridge the space with something honest, but the words stuck, heavy with the shame of wanting what I shouldn't. The day stretched on in that same charged quiet, chores pulling us into the same rooms, the same narrow hallways where avoidance felt impossible. Every shared glance carried the memory of the night before, the almost touch, the way her breath had caught when my fingers brushed too close. I found myself timing my movements to hers without meaning to, reaching for the same cabinet at the same moment, our arms grazing in that narrow space between stove and counter. The heat from her skin through the thin fabric of her sleeve stayed with me long after she stepped away, a phantom warmth that made the kitchen feel smaller, the air thicker. By evening the house had grown still again, Mom resting upstairs with the lights dimmed low against her headaches. Sleep wouldn't come for me no matter how I tried. I tossed in the guest bed until the clock glowed past 2, the sheets stangled around my legs like they were trying to hold me back, then finally gave in and padded downstairs for water I didn't really need. The kitchen light was off, but the back porch held a faint glow. She was already there, wrapped in a light robe that brushed her knees, a bottle of red wine open on the small table beside the narrow bench. "Cal didn't sleep either," she said with a small laugh that invited me closer without needing words. "The night air feels less heavy with company. Come sit." I settled beside her on the bench, the wood warm from the day's sun, our legs brushing inevitably in the limited space. The fabric of her robe shifted with the movement, and I became hyper-aware of the soft give where her thigh rested against mine. The faint lines time had etched there like quiet stories written across skin that had known real living. She had lived deeply, in ways that made my own experiences feel paper-thin and unformed. That's why this felt so dangerous, I realized in the hush between us, and so right at the same time. Girls my age were still discovering who they might become. She already knew who she was. Steady and unrelenting, we passed the bottle back and forth, the wine loosening the sharp edges of the silence that had wrapped around us since the laundry room. Her laugh came easier now, low and genuine when I pointed out a clumsy constellation I barely remembered from some half-forgotten school trip. She leaned in to correct me gently, her face inches from mine, close enough that I caught the vanilla on her breath angled with the deep, rich notes of the wine. The scent wrapped around me, warm and familiar yet suddenly electric, flooding my senses until the porch light seemed to dim everything else. My hand moved without permission, resting lightly on her knee, feeling the living heat beneath the thin robe, the subtle pulse beneath my palm. She froze, her eyes darkening in the low light, but she didn't pull away. "We shouldn't," she whispered, the words barely disturbing the air between us, fragile as the night itself. Yet her body stayed there, trembling just enough for me to feel it travel through that single point of contact, a shiver that echoed straight into my chest. The war inside me raging hotter than ever. Cross it, and there's no going back to the safe version of us, the one where I was just the kid she helped steady through tough times, where she was the steady hand it always relied on from afar. I crossed it anyway, just enough, my thumb tracing a small, slow circle that made her breath hitch softly, almost imperceptibly. The almost moment stretched between us, heavy with everything we weren't saying, the garden shadows watching like silent witnesses to the storm we were both trying desperately not to name. Inside my chest the conflict tore deeper. I should stand up right now, go back upstairs, remember every reason this was impossible. The years between us, the trust Mom had placed in her care, the way this could shatter the fragile peace we'd built in this house during hard times. But the hungered rounded out, sweet and aching like thirst after wandering lost for far too long. She had become the center of every quiet thought that kept me awake, the reason the nights felt endless and the days too short and bright. Her presence turned ordinary moments sacred, every shared breath a confession. I was ready to speak aloud, but couldn't hold back anymore. She shifted slightly on the bench, not away, and the wood creaked under our weight like a quiet warning we both chose to ignore. The wine glass sat forgotten between us, catching fragments of starlight. "Tell me something real," she said softly, her voice trembling on the edge of a question that felt bigger than the words. "Something you haven't told anyone." Her hand covered mine on her knee for a moment, not guiding, not stopping, just resting there in the charged space where everything almost happened, her fingers warm and steady against my unsteady ones. I swallowed hard, the words catching in my throat because what I wanted to confess was already written in the way I couldn't look away from her lips, the faint flush rising on her cheeks in the cool night air, the way a few strands of her hair had escaped completely and brushed my shoulder like an invitation wrapped in hesitation. The night deepened around us, crickets filling the pauses where our words faltered, their rhythm matching the quickening beat I could feel under my fingertips. This craving wasn't simple youth or rebellion or curiosity anymore. It was her, entirely her, the woman who had seen me through my lowest moments and still looked at me like I might be worth the risk she was taking too. In that almost kiss pace, with our faces drawn closer by invisible threads I couldn't name, the reflection from yesterday had only sharpened the need instead of easing it. Quiet persistence had brought me back here to this bench, to this breath-held moment, but now the pull demanded more, even as her whisper echoed between us like a fragile boundary we were both testing with every shared heartbeat. Her eyes held mine in the dark, waiting for whatever came next, the tremble in her leg under my hand, promising that the line was already blurring beyond recognition, pulling us both towards something neither of us could pretend was still innocent. The air between us thick with the weight of what we might say or do if one of us dared to move first. I could feel the heat radiating from her skin, inches away yet somehow closer than any touch I had ever known, her breath brushing my cheek like a secret she hadn't meant to share. Every second we stayed like that stretched longer, the wine bottle nearly empty now, the porch light casting soft shadows that hid nothing and revealed everything. My heart hammered so loud I was sure she could hear it, matching the unsteady rhythm of her own breathing that had grown shallower, quicker, as if the night itself was pressing us together. I wanted to pull back. God, I wanted to. The shame burned hot in my throat, reminding me of all the reasons this was wrong, the careful distance we had kept for years now crumbling under the weight of one late night and too much honest silence. But her hand stayed over mine, not pressing, not retreating, just there. Warm, steady, alive with the same quiet battle I was losing. She had lived enough to know better, and still she didn't move. That knowledge only made the ache sharper, the craving deeper, like falling into water you knew was too deep but couldn't stop swimming toward. Another breath, closer now, her vanilla scent mixing with the faint earthiness still clinging to her from the garden, grounding me and unraveling me all at once. Forgotten as her face tilted just a fraction nearer, lips parted on words she didn't speak. I felt the tremor travel through her knee again, up my arm, straight into the center of my chest where everything was unraveling. This was the edge. One more inch and the almost would become something else entirely, something that couldn't be taken back, couldn't be hidden behind morning coffee or garden chores or careful smiles. Yet I stayed, thumb still circling slowly, feeling the way her muscles tensed and then softened under that small touch. The surrender in it so subtle it could have been my imagination if not for the way her eyes fluttered half-closed for a heartbeat. The war inside me raged on. Stop now, remember who she is, who I am, how fragile this house of cards had become, but the hunger won another round, pulling me closer until our foreheads nearly touched, the space between us humming with electricity that made my skin prickle and my breath catch in my throat. She whispered my name then, soft and broken, like a question and a warning wrapped in one trembling syllable. The sound of it sent another wave through me, deeper this time, settling low and insistent. I knew we were balancing on something precious and dangerous, the kind of moment that changes everything if you let it. And in the heavy quiet of that porch, with the stars watching and the wine warm in our veins, I wasn't sure either of us wanted to step back anymore. The garden seemed to hold its breath with us, leaves rustling faintly in a breeze that carried the mingled scents of turned earth and night-blooming flowers. My mind kept flashing back to the way she had looked in the garden that morning, so grounded and vibrant, grounded, and now here she was inches from me, trembling under the lightest pressure of my hand. It felt like the whole day had been leading to this single suspended instant, every accidental brush and shared glance tightening the invisible cord between us. I could sense the conflict in her too, the way her fingers pressed a fraction firmer over mine before easing again, as if she were fighting the same current that threatened to sweep us both away. Time lost its edges out there. The wine had done its work, softening the sharp lines of hesitation until all that remained was the magnetic draw, the quiet hunger that had been building since I first stepped into this house again. Her robe had slipped slightly at the shoulder, revealing nothing but the soft curve where sun had kissed her skin earlier, experience wrapped in warmth, and I was falling so hard it scared me even as it thrilled every part of me that had been waiting for someone who truly saw. But the words hung there unfinished, more invitation than barrier in the way her body leaned ever so slightly into the space I occupied. My own thoughts fractured between the desperate need to respect the line and the overwhelming urge to trace it with my fingers until it dissolved. The almost kiss hovered like a promise neither of us had voiced, our breaths mingling in the cool air, carrying hints of shared wine and unspoken yearnings. I could feel the rapid flutter of her pulse under my palm, matching the storm in my own chest, and in that alignment something shifted, a quiet persistence turning into shared surrender, even if only for these stolen seconds on a back porch under indifferent stars, wrapping us in its velvet hush, and I wondered how much longer we could balance here before one of us tipped us both over the edge we kept circling. Her eyes, dark and searching, held mine with a depth that made my stomach twist with equal parts fear and longing. This craving had roots now, tangled deep in the soil of our shared history and the new terrain we were discovering together, and pulling them out felt impossible when every breath she took near me only watered them further, the air between us thick with the weight of what we might say or do if one of us dared to move first. Later that night the house had gone quiet except for the low hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of old floorboards. I lay on the guest room bed staring at the ceiling, heart still knocking against my ribs from the porch, when I heard her footsteps on the stairs. Soft, careful, like she was trying not to wake the whole world or maybe just herself. She had gone up to check on Mom again, the way she always did before turning in, but this time she didn't pass my door. This time the knob turned and the hallway light spilled in around her silhouette, outlining the curve of her shoulders under that thin robe. She didn't speak at first, just stood there with one hand still on the doorframe as if she needed something solid to hold on to. The scent of her drifted in ahead of her, vanilla and sandalwood warmed by her skin, wrapping around me before she even crossed the threshold. My breath caught somewhere high in my throat. I sat up slowly, the sheet pooling at my waist, and our eyes met in the dim glow. Everything we hadn't said outside pressed between us now, heavy and alive. I rose without thinking, drawn by that same pull that had kept us circling each other for days. The air felt charged, like the storm we both sensed but refused to name. Her robe whispered against the door as she stepped inside, closing it with a soft click that sealed us in this fragile world of our own making. I checked on her friend. "Just sleeping," she murmured, voice low and rough around the edges, carrying the weight of every almost we had shared. Her fingers found my wrist first, tentative yet sure, tracing the pulse there as if measuring how fast we were both falling. "We shouldn't." The thought echoed in my head even as my body leaned closer, the heat from her skin radiating through the thin fabric between us, but the words never left my lips. Instead, I let her guide me those last few inches until our foreheads touched, breaths mingling in the narrow space. The garden soil and night flowers still clung faintly to her from earlier, mixing with the vanilla that always seemed to follow her like a secret. My hands hovered at her waist, not quite touching, feeling the warmth there like a promise suspended in the dark. Every doubt I carried about age, about Mom upstairs, about what this would mean tomorrow, they all trembled but didn't break us apart. Her hands moved with quiet confidence, experienced in ways that made my younger uncertainty feel safe for once. She pulled me gently toward the bed, the mattress dipping under our combined weight as we sank down together. Fabric brushed fabric, lace catching lightly against my chest, sending ripples of electricity through me that had nothing to do with haste and everything to do with the slow, overwhelming gravity of her nearness. I forgot how to breathe properly, lost in the way her body fit against mine, warm and knowing, guiding without demand. This is what I've been starving for, my mind confessed in the haze, not the rushed encounters with girls who felt like echoes. The depth. The patience that made every second stretch into something sacred and terrifying. The tension that had built since that first porch conversation finally snapped, not with force but with a quiet surrender that left us both trembling. Her fingers tightened in my hair, a small honest sound escaping her that felt like the most vulnerable truth I had ever witnessed. Heat building between us like a storm finally breaking after years of gathering clouds. I sank into the moment completely, every doubt drowned out by the overwhelming rightness of her warmth enveloping me, teaching me through touch what words could never capture, not girls. Her, only her, with her quiet strength and the way she held me like I was both fragile and exactly what she had been missing. Afterward we laid angled in sheets that carried her scent and the faint trace of shared warmth, hearts still racing in the quiet aftermath. As if the walls themselves understood the shift, she traced the line of my jaw with one fingertip, slow and wondering, like she was memorizing the shape of this moment in case morning stole it away. Her eyes glistened in the low light filtering from the hallway crack. "I've wanted this since you turned 20, she confessed, voice barely above a breath, cracking slightly on the admission. Watched you grow into yourself from across family gatherings, told myself it was wrong, that I was wrong for noticing the way your laugh deep endure, how your eyes lingered. But tonight I couldn't pretend anymore. I feel guilty, God. The guilt is there, but I also feel more alive than I have in years." A tear slipped free and I brushed it away with my thumb, feeling the power dynamic between us soften into something tender and aching. I held her closer, chest tight with emotions I hadn't named until now. Raw and quickened over once the hunger was fed. "It's so much more." The guilt in her voice twisted something deep inside me, made me want to shield her even while knowing I was the reason it existed. We lay there listening to the house settle around us, wicked game playing faintly from somewhere down the hall like the universe had chosen the perfect melancholic melody for our surrender. Her warm skin pressed to mine, the vanilla lingering on my collarbone with every small shift, every breath reminding me how real and irreversible this had become. I whispered back words I barely recognized as my own, telling her how long I had craved her quiet confidence, the way she moved through the garden like she understood growth in ways I was only beginning to grasp. The internal war raged softly even in the afterglow. "This is wrong, Chess Mom's friend. The age between us carries years I can't erase." Yet the pull to stay wrapped in her arms won out, making the conflict feel almost sweet in its intensity. We talked in fragments, voices low, sharing pieces of ourselves we had kept hidden. She spoke of lonely evenings after everyone left, of watching me mature from afar and fighting the unexpected hunger it stirred. I admitted the secret glances I stole, the way her presence had always felt like home and danger intertwined. The rest of the week blurred into stolen fragments we guarded like fragile treasure in a house that could wake at any moment. Morning coffee in the kitchen turned into slow, lingering presses against the counter while Mom slept upstairs, her hands framing my face like I was something precious she still couldn't quite believe she held. The scent of fresh grounds mixed with her skin, creating a new memory that wrapped around my senses. Laundry forgotten on the floor, half-folded shirts scattered while we lost minutes, hours, in the quiet closeness that spoke louder than any bold move. Her experienced touch guided me through patience and fire in equal measure, teaching without words the kind of connection no one my age had ever offered. Quiet nights blurred into more of those suspended almost moments that stretched longer each time, her breath warm against my neck as we stole seconds in the hallway or the dim living room after lights out. Each encounter left me breathless, changed, the hunger evolving into a deeper craving for her presence, her voice, the way she looked at me like I finally made sense in her world. We navigated the days with careful normalcy, helping with Mom's recovery, sharing meals where our knees brushed under the table, sending secret sparks, all while the electricity hummed beneath every polite word. When Mom started feeling stronger and asked why we seemed so easy together now, Sarah just smiled, that soft, knowing smile, and said had been a huge help around the house, her eyes meeting mine across the table with layers only we understood. The secret tucked behind polite conversation made my pulse jump every time, a private thrill laced with the ache of knowing it couldn't last openly. I helped with dishes, shoulders brushing on purpose, her breath warm against my neck when she reached past me for a glass, the vanilla and sandalwood pulling me under again. The internal wrestling never fully quieted. What if Mom senses it? What if this ruins everything? Am I taking advantage of her loneliness, yet the tenderness in her touch always silenced the doubts for a little longer? As I packed to leave on the last day, the sky outside hung gray and heavy, mirroring the twist in my chest. She slipped into the guest room while I zipped the duffel, closing the door with a soft click that felt louder than it should, like the final seal on our hidden world. She pulled me close one final time, arms wrapping around me with that same sure strength, lips brushing my ear in a way that sent fresh tremors through me. "This doesn't have to end here," she whispered, the words trembling like a question she was afraid to ask fully, carrying both hope and the shadow of guilt we both carried. I could feel her heart beat against mine, rapid and uncertain, the vanilla and sandalwood wrapping around us like a promise we both knew carried weight and consequences. I drove away with the taste of our last shared breath still lingering and the echo of her voice in my ears, the road stretching long and empty ahead under gathering clouds. Part of me wanted to turn around at every mile marker, to run back and beg for more mornings where her laugh filled the kitchen, more stolen nights where her nearness taught me what real connection felt like. But another part knew the careful life she had built, the guilt that would return stronger in daylight, and the way this craving had roots too deep to pull without tearing something essential in both of us. We had crossed into territory that felt inevitable yet forbidden, tasted the fulfillment of what had been unspoken for so long, and now it sat inside me like a quiet flame worm, consuming, impossible to ignore or extinguish. The miles slipped by, but the ache only deepened, bittersweet and unresolved, whispering that some hungers don't fade once named. They learned to wait in the dark instead, patient as garden soil after rain, ready to bloom again the moment her voice calls my name across the distance. No matter how dangerous the garden grew or how much it cost us both in the end. The secret no longer unspoken, yet somehow still haunting me with everything we left and said, pulling me back before I had even truly left. This pull between us, unfinished and alive, like the last note of that song fading into silence but still vibrating somewhere deep inside. The days after that first night blurred together in a haze of careful touches and stolen glances, each one carrying the weight of what we had done and the fear of what might come next. I would wake early, heart already racing at the thought of seeing her in the kitchen light, her hair still messy from sleep, robe tied loosely as if daring the world to notice. We moved around each other with this new awareness, every pour of coffee feeling like a continuation of the night before, every shared laugh hiding the tremble underneath. She would brush past me to reach the sugar, her shoulder grazing mine just enough to send that familiar electricity sparking down my spine, and I would stand there frozen, caught between pulling her closer and remembering Mom was only a floor above us. One afternoon while Mom napped, we found ourselves in the laundry room, the air thick with the scent of fresh linens and detergent. She reached for a basket on the high shelf and I stepped in without thinking, my chest pressing lightly to her back as I helped lift it down. For a long moment neither of us moved, the warmth of her body so close it made my head spin. Her breath hitched, soft and unsteady, and I could feel the rapid beat of her heart matching mine. We stayed like that, suspended in the almost, the basket forgotten between us, until the distant sound of Mom stirring upstairs pulled us apart with guilty smiles and flushed cheeks. It was never just help anymore. Everything carried that undercurrent, that secret knowledge of how perfectly we fit when no one was watching. Evenings brought their own quiet rituals. We would sit on the porch again after dinner, wine glasses in hand, talking about nothing and everything while the garden faded into shadow. Her foot would rest near mine on the step, not touching but close enough that the heat traveled between us like a living thing. She would tell me stories from her younger days, voice low and intimate, and I would listen, mesmerized by the way her eyes softened when she looked at me, as if I was the one piece of her life that made the loneliness bearable. The guilt never left her completely. I could see it in the way she sometimes pulled back mid-sentence, eyes clouding over with regret. But then she would reach for my hand under the cover of darkness and hold on like I was her anchor in the storm we had created together. By the time the week drew to its close, the house felt smaller, every room holding memories of our hidden moments. The kitchen counter where her fingers had traced patterns on my arm while the coffee brewed. The hallway where her breath had warmed my neck in a quick stolen kiss before we heard footsteps. The guest room where we had first crossed that line, sheets still carrying traces of vanillas and sandalwood that I would breathe in deeply each night before sleep claimed me. It was all too much and not enough, this balance of tenderness and craving that left me aching even when she was right beside me. As the car idled in the driveway on that final gray morning, I turned to look at the house one last time, knowing the garden would keep growing without me, that Sarah would tend it with those same patient hands that had held me so carefully. She stood on the porch watching me leave, arms wrapped around herself against the chill. Her smile brave, but her eyes telling a different story. The pull didn't lessen with distance. If anything, it sharpened, carving out a space inside me that only she could fill. I drove into the gathering rain with her whisper still echoing this docent have to end, wondering how long we could keep this secret alive before the weight of it changed us forever, or before the longing simply became the only truth we both